It's almost the new year, so you're probably seeing a lot of videos on the top stocks for 2025, but they're mostly filled with random companies and cherry-picked price charts. This video is a little different. Every stock on my list works together, so that I'm holding all the winners in a few massive markets that are growing fast thanks to AI. That's the best way to get rich without getting lucky. Your time is valuable, so let's get right into it. First things first, accountability is important. I made a video like this a year ago, and here's how the stocks performed, so you can decide if it's worth watching the rest of this video, which covers the updates to this list for 2025. I'm also not here to hold you hostage, so here's the updated list of stocks for the year, and there are timestamps so you can jump to different companies. But let me quickly point out a few things before you do. First, I'm not a financial advisor. My background is in electrical engineering and data science, and I have over 10 years of industry experience using AI to solve real-world problems. Today, I'm a full-time investor, and I share my research for educational purposes only. That also means I only invest inside my circle of competence, so every stock on my list focuses on AI and the chips that power it, and I always buy to hold for the long term, which usually means 3 to 5 years. Second, this isn't some be-all end-all master stock list. Instead, it's a solid foundation for my portfolio in 2025 and beyond. If I want to add more great companies like Microsoft or Tesla stock down the road, I will, and I'll explain why they didn't make the list in a minute. Third, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll see a lot of overlap with the stocks I picked a year ago, and I'll make sure to explain any changes from last year's list as we go. And finally, there's a lot of ground to cover, so this video will stay pretty high level. My entire channel focuses on the science behind the stocks, and if there's a company that you're interested in learning more about, you can probably find a video where I cover it in way more detail. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's dive into the list. In my opinion, the foundation of every solid long-term portfolio actually starts with a fund. The advice that I always get is to put my money into the market every month, which usually means buying an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is a basket of 500 stocks from the biggest public US companies weighted by their market cap. So the more valuable the company, the more of the basket its stock takes up. The thing is, 500 companies is a lot, so the S&P 500 usually grows slow and steady, even when its biggest holdings are skyrocketing. Let me show you what I mean. The top 5 companies in the S&P 500 right now are Apple, nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta Platforms. Apple stock is up 40% year to date. Amazon stock is up 52%. Meta Platforms is up by a whopping 74%, and nvidia is up by a staggering 190% since the start of 2024. But the S&P 500 is up just 27%, and that's actually incredible one-year performance for this index. Last year, I said it was simple to beat the market. Not easy, but simple. All I had to do was hold the NASDAQ 100 instead of the S&P 500, since the NASDAQ is a much more concentrated fund that focuses on technology companies, which tend to outperform over the long term. Now it's 1 year later, and the NASDAQ is up by 32% versus the S&P's 27%, which works out to about 18% more returns over the year. But the NASDAQ also holds a lot of companies that don't fit the AI-focused portfolio that I want, with some of its biggest holdings being Costco, T-Mobile, and Pepsi. So I decided to find a fund that did, and I landed on Vanguard's Information Technology ETF, ticker symbol VGT. I like this fund for a few reasons. First, most of the companies in VGT focus on semiconductors, hardware systems, software, and applications, while skipping companies like Costco and Pepsi altogether. I suspect that's why it slightly outperformed the NASDAQ over the last 5 years, and could do even better as AI keeps getting adopted across many different markets. Second, even though it holds over 300 companies, the top 10 holdings account for about 58% of the fund. In fact, just Apple, nvidia, and Microsoft make up over 45% of this fund. That means this fund can let its winners ride, instead of always having to rebalance and miss big moves, which is great for long-term investing. And because it holds so much Microsoft stock specifically, I can drop Microsoft from my list, which opens up a spot for a company with more growth potential. And third, the Triple Qs has an expense ratio of 0.2%, while VGT's expense ratio is 0.1%. So I end up getting a little more performance for half the fees. But just to be clear, the NASDAQ 100 is a great index, and replacing it with VGT is a tiny change in the grand scheme of my portfolio. Surprising no one, the next company on my list is nvidia. because they dominate the market for data center GPUs, which are the main kind of chip powering both sides of AI applications like ChatGPT. Inference, where people prompt it to generate an answer, and training, where the AI model learns to predict the next token by analyzing massive amounts of data. And speaking of data, I found out that dozens of online data brokers were selling my personal data. And if you've been getting lots of spam phone calls, texts, or emails lately, they might be selling yours too. That's why I joined Delete Me, the sponsor of this video. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information from hundreds of online data brokers. You just sign up, enter your information, and let their experts get to work. They've reviewed over 41,000 listings for me so far, and found over 100 data brokers with my information. After 7 days, you get a detailed privacy report showing everything they've done. I just got my 7th report, and Delete Me found hundreds of pieces of my personal information across 46 separate data brokers. And not just my name and address, but my mom's and my fiance's too. But here's the best part. They'll keep scanning these websites even after they remove my information. And I get my own privacy advisor if I want to talk to a real person and make a custom removal request. So if you care about your data and your family's privacy, you can get 20% off any consumer plan with my code SYMBOL20 by going to joindeleteme.com/symbol20 or by using my link in the description. And a big thank you to Delete Me for supporting the channel and keeping my family's data safe. Alright, nvidia currently has a massive 90% share of the data center GPU market. Their only real competitor is AMD, which has around 4 or 5%. The reason I spend so much time covering nvidia is to understand how long they can defend this massive lead. I think this is the single most important question in the stock market today, because the global artificial intelligence market is expected to 11x in size over the next 9 years, which works out to a massive 30% compound annual growth rate through 2033. Based on everything I've learned by going to NVIDIA's headquarters, attending their GTC conferences, and interviewing their executives, I think that NVIDIA's hold on the data center GPU market looks a lot like Google's hold on the search market. Google will never get disrupted by another search engine. It'll get disrupted by generative AI-based agents that save users from manually having to search through tons of websites and advertisements. Likewise, I don't think NVIDIA will ever get disrupted by another GPU maker. They'll eventually get disrupted by a different kind of AI chip altogether. That's why I've taken AMD off my list for 2025. That doesn't make AMD a bad company. But when you can own 90% of one key AI market with a single stock, there's no real reason to buy a second. Speaking of which, now's probably a good time to explain these green and blue check marks. Green means a company is a market leader. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have a whopping 63% of the global infrastructure market combined, a market that grew 23% year over year. The next biggest cloud infrastructure provider is Alibaba, with only a 4% market share. So I can own almost 2/3 of this market in just 3 stocks, Google and Amazon individually, and Microsoft as 13% of the Vanguard IT fund. This is what I meant about all the stocks on my list working together. No matter who wins, I win. No luck needed. NVIDIA also has its own enterprise software and AI cloud services, but they're much less widely used and a much smaller portion of NVIDIA's overall revenue. So I gave NVIDIA blue checks in those categories. On the flip side, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, as well as Meta Platforms, all build their own chips, but they don't really compete with NVIDIA because they don't sell their chips to other companies. Instead, they send specific workloads to their own chips and save NVIDIA's GPUs for the most compute-intensive workloads. The other 2 stocks that I'll highlight in this category are Broadcom and Vertiv Holdings. Broadcom makes high-performance switches, network interface cards, wireless networking solutions, and custom application-specific integrated circuits, or ASICs, for the big hyperscalers. For example, Broadcom was involved in designing every generation of Google's tensor processing units, or TPUs. They also design custom high-performance top-of-rack switches for AI data centers, and the chips inside these switches can be stitched together to support massive GPU clusters. At a high level, you can think of Broadcom's networking solutions as direct competitors to NVIDIA's Spectrum Ethernet and Quantum InfiniBand switches, except they're aimed at hyperscalers that develop their own AI chips, like Google, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. That's why I tagged them as a leader in AI chips and data centers. Back in 2019, Broadcom also acquired Symantec, a cybersecurity platform for desktops, laptops, and servers, for small businesses all the way to the biggest enterprises. Symantec's software focuses on things like firewalls, application controls, and exploit prevention systems to protect endpoint devices from viruses, malware, and hackers. Also, about a year ago, Broadcom acquired VMware, which lets companies of all sizes set up virtual machines to do things like pool resources from multiple servers to run more compute-intensive workloads, create isolated environments to process sensitive data, or create a backup machine that takes over when a primary machine goes down. VMware has around a 60% market share in the virtualization market, and Symantec has over a 75% share of the market for Windows anti-malware applications, making both of these great software acquisitions for Broadcom and why it has blue checks in these areas. Also, it turns out that power represents about 60 to 70% of the total operational cost of a data center, and cooling accounts for 40 to 50% of a data center's power consumption. That means that cooling alone represents anywhere from 24 to 35% of the total cost of operating a data center. Vertiv Holdings, ticker symbol VRT, makes power and thermal management systems for data centers. One nice thing about Vertiv's liquid cooling solutions is they can integrate with existing data center infrastructures, which lowers the total operational costs involved in transitioning from air cooling to liquid cooling. The global data center liquid cooling market is expected to grow by almost 6x over the next 9 years, which would be a 21% compound annual growth rate through 2033. But industry analysts expect up to 80% of data center cooling to move specifically to direct-to-chip liquid cooling over time, which means that Vertiv has the perfect product for this quickly growing market. That's why they have a green check in the AI data centers column, and the Vanguard IT Fund gets blue check marks across the board since it holds at least a few big companies in each of these markets. As you can see, these checkmarks are not an exact science. I'm just trying to show you how these stocks work together in my portfolio at a high level, and there's a lot more to each of these companies than I can cover in a single video. So I'll make sure to cover them over the year, just like I did in 2024. And if you feel I've earned it so far, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. That really helps me out, and that way you'll be the first to know when I publish new research on these stocks. Anyway, between nvidia, Broadcom, Vertiv, ARM, and the big three cloud providers, I can own almost the entire AI accelerator market, the data center infrastructure market, and the cloud service market without worrying about who's winning at any given time. That's how I'm virtually guaranteed to hold the winners in these quickly growing markets with just 5 or 6 stocks. No luck needed. Now let's switch gears to cybersecurity and enterprise software. The global cloud security market is expected to 5x in size over the next 8 years, which would be a compound annual growth rate of over 22% through 2032. But cybersecurity is actually many different things. For example, access management and authentication ensures that only the right users with the right permissions can move around the right parts of a network. Identity protection doesn't protect a network at all. It protects user information from getting stolen. That's where Delete Me fits in, but for your personal data on the open internet, instead of inside a specific company's network. Endpoint protection doesn't protect a user at all. It protects workstations, laptops, tablets, smartphones, or any other device that connects to a specific network. Despite the global outage of 2024, CrowdStrike is a great cybersecurity company focused on endpoint detection and response. They have an enterprise platform called Falcon to defend against breaches and respond to any attacks that do manage to get through. CrowdStrike's Falcon platform has 3 major parts. They have a library of cloud-based modules that do things like antivirus scanning, firewall management, and locking down different kinds of cyber threats and malware. They also have a proprietary threat graph that tracks the connections between people, their devices and permissions, and the networks they have access to, which they can then compare against the actual device and network traffic to deal with any anomalies as they come up. And to do that, they have the Falcon Agent, which is a tiny piece of software that runs on every device and sends data back to CrowdStrike so they know when to run their different cloud modules and keep their threat graph up to date. CrowdStrike is the market leader in endpoint detection and response, with Gartner ranking them above great companies like Palo Alto Networks, SentinelOne, and even Microsoft for the 5th consecutive time. And if you want more proof of their staying power, CrowdStrike stock is up around 50% for the year, even after it had to recover from the outage fiasco that happened this past summer. On the flip side, Fortinet focused on intrusion detection systems and firewalls, like with their FortiGate systems, which monitor and control network traffic based on predefined security rules. I won't spend too much time on Fortinet, since they were already on my list in 2024, but you can think of their solutions as security checkpoints but for network data instead of users. Fortinet also offers firewalls as a service through FortiGate Cloud for companies that don't need physical on-site solutions, and just like CrowdStrike, Gartner ranks Fortinet as the market leader for software-defined wide area networks, above huge companies like Hewlett-Packard, Broadcom, Cisco, and Palo Alto Networks. And speaking of market leaders, I saved the best performing company for last. Palantir makes AI-powered platforms that give huge enterprises a real-time view of their data to optimize their operations. Palantir tends to focus on high-risk and highly regulated markets like national security, heavy industries, medical, and international transport. Users can even send commands to assets under their control directly from Palantir's platforms. For example, a power company can monitor and rotate wind turbines, a logistics company can reroute its trucks, and a commander can task different military units in real time, which shows just how much some of the biggest governments and enterprises on the planet trust Palantir's platforms with their most sensitive data. Because of that, Palantir solutions need to be incredibly accurate, fast, and secure, which is a big challenge for AI-based tools today. I had access to Palantir's Foundry for about half a year, and I really don't think they have any serious competition. And if they do, it's going to be from a company that's already near the top of this list. So I win no matter which company comes out on top. No luck needed. Generative AI is constantly coming out with new surprises, new breakthroughs, new use cases, apps, and devices. Whether a company focuses on one thing like liquid cooling, or it has its hands in everything like the tech giants, it needs to be able to keep up with the state of the art, or it's going to get disrupted by a new company that can. As a result, the stock market tends to reward companies that are fast and flexible, which is why that's the last column on my list. I know this video is a little long, but I wanted to be really thorough since the whole idea is to build a solid foundation for 2025 and beyond. And in my opinion, that's the best way to get rich without getting lucky. So one more time, here's my list from 2024 with the year-to-date performance. For 2025, I made the following changes. I replaced the NASDAQ 100 with Vanguard's IT ETF. I replaced Microsoft with Broadcom. I switched AMD out for ARM, Palo Alto Networks out for CrowdStrike, and UiPath for Vertiv Holdings. And because last year's list actually only had 9 stocks on it, I added Meta Platforms, since I strongly believe in the long-term performance of founder-led companies. And Mark Zuckerberg is one of the most experienced founders in all of Silicon Valley, only behind nvidia's Jensen Huang. So there you have it, my updated list of top 10 stocks to get rich without getting lucky in 2025. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching to the end, even though I gave you everything up front. Have a wonderful holiday, and until next time, this is ticker symbol U. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.